This podcast is brought to you by Connect First Credit Union. Hey, thanks for joining us on our second episode of What's Next Alberta. I'm your host, Wellington Holbrook, and this podcast is a place where we're going to talk about the future, where we're going together as a province. And for episode number 2, I have to tell you, I'm really excited about talking about technology. Everybody's talking about technology. Like, technology is going to save Alberta. It is going to be change our province, and there's no question it is, right? But I think a lot of it is often based in pipe dreams or this imaginary world. I'm really excited that we have a guest here today that I'm going to introduce in a few moments that's actually living that future already and has been for a couple decades. And so he's got that experience. He can share some of those stories and talk a little bit about a business he's building right now in our province. But just before we go there, just wanted to set the topic up just a little bit. All of us have different reasons for, having our different thoughts around what we think about technology. We have different reasons for believing in it or not believing in it as much. Yet, it's hard not to be induced by the exciting idea that tech can be a solution to so many of our problems. Wherever there's scarcity, technology often creates abundance. Where we see problems that get in the way, technology is often the solution to make those problems go away. And right now, in terms of the conversations that are happening across our province, a lot of people are hoping that technology might be part of the solution to our economic challenges we're facing as a province. But certainly, technology plays a role in all sorts of areas in our province. The economy might be a big one. Personally, just sharing some of my stories, I have to tell you that having spent at this point well over 25 years in financial services, and I have to tell you, when I look in the mirror and I see all this gray hair, it's starting to sink in. It has been really over 25 years I've been working in financial services. I can tell you technology I've seen it transform business after business. And often, it's more, it's actually, let me say it a different way. It's less obvious than sometimes we think it will be. I think of, my own family, my mother, she ran a business for years. And, this is an old story at this point, technology that isn't new anymore. But I remember when the bank introduced her to using EFTs, electronic fund transfers, as opposed to having to cut checks. And I remember as a kid, the sound in my house was the dot matrix printer printing off check after check after check to pay her suppliers, pay her employees, pay whoever. And she never heard of EFTs. And one day, her banker introduced her to this notion of EFTs, and it changed her life. She got her Sundays back. And I know that's may not sound like a big transformation, but for her, that was a day of in the week. She actually got returned to her where she could do things she wanted and not just be working in her business, which she loved doing too, by the way. And if you think about some of the most attractive businesses in the world today, companies like Uber or take your pick, what they've done is they've taken existing challenges or problems and found new ways to solve them with technology. And so often it's not about technology changing the world itself. It's really around how we're solving existing problems using technology differently. In the case of Uber, they took the problem of connecting passengers with, basically abundant automobiles that are available everywhere, with drivers who have time and wanted to make extra money, and they used technology to match the two up, and they solved a big problem and became literally a global multi-billion-dollar phenomenon. So today we're going to talk with a special guest that I'm very, very pleased to consider a friend. His name's Phil Roberts. Someone who's really, really well-versed in technology and the landscape in Alberta. He recently became CEO of Valo Networks, a company that partners with rural communities to bring high-speed broadband solutions, and we're going to let him tell you all about that. And his company has got a great story how they're contributing to the future of our province. But personally, Phil's got a great story of his own journey too, and I'm hoping we're going to talk a little bit about that. But Phil, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Wellington. Super happy to be here. It's a very timely topic, and it's one that I think we need to dive into a little bit more because it's changing rapidly.
So, Phil, we want to talk a little bit about the company you're leading right now, but maybe we could start with you. Like, a lot of people are dreaming about how they can build a future technology company in our province, right. But you're doing it, and you've done it. You've done it more than once. Can you talk? Bring us back to the beginning. Like, how did Phil become a leader in technology in Alberta?
Right. Sure. It started for us in in the late 90s. We're born and raised in Montreal, my wife and I. And we were part of the CP Rail move. So,
cool.
Definitely the sort of the old economy and the old traditional Canadian company.
A big deal when CP moved to Calgary.
Pretty big. Where is that? 1,100 families that moved out. And,
incredible.
It was massive, right?
Yeah.
So we were part of that. We actually got married that summer, and the company said, we're transferring her father out here. And he said, I'll go if you bring my family. And we came out. And for us, we've never really looked back, and it's just been amazing. So did that, worked in a bank for a short period of time. Figured out I was not a banker.
Nothing wrong with banking, of course.
Nothing wrong with banking. Nothing wrong with banking, but not a banker. Actually, I enjoyed it, and it's funny. And some of the people I worked with, actually, I still run into, and it's interesting how so early in my career, I still carry a lot of that forward and the learnings that I had there. Cash is king, I think, was the first thing I learned on my first day at the bank. So did that, and then got into telecom, actually, through TELUS. It was just the end of the regulated period, right? They were deregulating the industry. It was the end of Stentor. Right. So I got to see the dismantling of sort of this global or national monopoly. And see how a company completely changed who they were, like completely. You think about this government-run telephone company switching into a mobility, forward-thinking, highly competitive, certainly at the time, company, right? Culturally, systems, everything. So to be a part of that early in your career it was a really good opportunity for me.
Yeah, right on.
So I did that for 8 years, was part of the Eastern push, moved out east for a little bit.
Wow.
Came back, always had that sort of that leading edge working on the latest products within the company. Moved over to a smaller company called Axia. We did the SuperNet out in rural Alberta, connected all the communities with broadband. I was responsible for building the service provider community.
Okay.
We got that up to about 80 when I left. So it's about 100 service providers competing for rural Albertan business, which I think is a really cool thing. People don't see it that way. And within that, my tenure at Axia, I got to see not just what we did here in Alberta, but also work on some of the deals that we did in France and Europe and the US and be a part of that and just learn how all of the technology gets implemented and the change required in those early stages, always with the backing of a bigger company behind you. So it's sort of a safe way to get into it.
Yeah.
And then went to a smaller company, late 2014, joined a energy company, a software company. Great time to join energy sector in 2015. It was impeccable timing. But that was also a really good journey. We had really good shareholders that really believed in the vision of where the company can go and what it could do and the benefit that it could bring. One of our biggest customers was also a shareholder. Okay. So that faith was I think important. Because of 2015 and what happened there economically, we had to just reshift and rethink our entire model. So talk about pivoting, but we pivoted in the middle of having existing contracts. So, it was just, it was a really hard period, but we learned so much and the company's still going. It's doing quite well and people running it are doing a great job. I exited that and always went to sort of a smaller one. And a colleague of mine went off to an incubator in Copenhagen for a month, lived together in res and just bounced around ideas and everything else, came back. He took that forward and it's going actually really well for him. So it's an Alberta ag tech company here called Provision Analytics. And Eric is doing an amazing job growing that. It's getting a lot of traction in the market. And then in that time period, started this company, Valo, from the people that I had worked with in the past. And the opportunity was just right for all these pieces to come together and say, broadband it's one of those things that the more you make available, the more demand there is for it. So there's always this increasing demand. So now was the time for us to do it. And then Valo got some really good traction. I was working in a logistics automation company called Payload. We did that again. It was the same thing, transforming it to adapt it to the new technologies. Did that for about a year and a half. Company's still going. And then what we what we saw with the pandemic was the opportunity to really double down on rural broadband.
Yeah.
And we said, we're working with rural communities like Red Deer County. We're building the middle mile. SuperNet brought the internet to the communities, but not in the communities. So we saw the opportunity there.
Right.
And we took the learnings from all of that in the past, and then just kind of created Valo and doubled down on the potential.
So we're going to have to dig in a little bit deeper to Valo, of course. But I think as you've taken us on that journey as to where you've come from, it's funny how, and I'm hearing it in your stories, how there's sometimes these unexpected, I would say they're not coincidences, but connections that get created that come back to help you later.
Well, it's a fairly cohesive, long story when I put it all together.
Yeah.
But it's funny because at each one of those, none of it was planned.
Yeah.
None of it was planned. I couldn't tell you that I planned to go to TELUS. Telecom was not even on my radar. It was always exciting. I had dial-up at home and I was playing on the internet and doing all that in the early days, but I never thought I'd go and join it until I'm literally walking in the hallway with someone who looked at me and go, "Oh, I meant to ask you, are you interested in a job in the spring? Because my daughter works at TELUS and she's looking for a junior analyst." I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" And then went in. Never thought I'd go to Axia, but they were recruiting, and I said, "Yeah, that sounds interesting." Never thought I would go to have the opportunity to go to France and work on that project, but that worked out.
And now you're on your third or fourth technology
and it just
company.
All of a sudden it's like, you know what? I think just to bring back to your original question or comment around people looking to get into the technology industry, and if I look back, one thing I have to think was key to just getting to where I am is never saying no, right? or just always looking at an opportunity with that open mind and just say, that sounds cool. Not reckless. There's a big difference between reckless and, doing anything. Yeah. But all those opportunities that come up, let's go and try it.
So pushing your comfort zone to take on new things, try things.
Absolutely.
Make connections with past relationships to bring, it's a pretty cool story. So let's start here. Everybody is all excited about technology, and you must get calls all the time. How do I solve this? Or I would be surprised if the leaders in our city and our province aren't calling you regularly to say, can you be a part of the solution? How do you respond to those kinds of questions?
Well, it's hard, because technology is so broad. Mm-hmm. You have such if you say, a specific industry, I don't know, let's take trucking. You say, okay, trucking, we know what it does. It carries things from point A to point B. And if you need to solve logistics and moving things around, trucking's a part of it. It's got a very well-defined role.
Right.
When you look at technology, it's so broad, right? Yeah. And you say, okay, technology is going to solve our problem. You go, yeah, but how or what? And there's various levels of it. I think if we look at the education sector, not the delivery of education, but if you look at the education sector, their challenge around technology is going, what is going to be the future of technology so that we can train people in that future of technology? So they face that challenge of trying to predict. And then if you look at some of the larger organizations, let's take the government, who's trying to solve the delivery of services to their constituents, they go, okay, specifically, how do I address, video health services, right? And then they get into some of the specifics. And then you look at a company whose business model is challenged, either from global competition or from pandemics, and they go, how do we reinvent ourselves? And now they're the ones that are struggling with, looking at a different technology and saying, how do we apply that to our business?
Right on.
So it's so broad that it's really hard to pinpoint and say, technology is going to solve your problem, and here's how. Well, it depends. It really, really depends on. So that's the challenge, right? And that's also part of the opportunity, because you get to define it in a lot of ways. Any business gets to look at technology and decide what's the comfort level that they have in adoption, what's the comfort level in budgets that they have for implementation, and also looking at the competitive surroundings. And some of them just go full in and just double down and go straight for it and bet the farm on it and succeed, and others take a more reserved approach. And I think all those models are right. But what's exciting, and I think what's exciting for Alberta specifically is that shift is starting to happen.
Yeah.
Right? We're starting to see that. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about Valo. And I think one of the things that you shared with me when I asked if you'd join us was kind of neat that a company named Connect First would ask a company that connects like Valo to the table for our second podcast.
Yeah,
so
it's so obvious. Cool. It's almost a dad joke.
It's almost a dad joke. I love it, actually.
But it's really good. And a lot of what you said in your first podcast, I think, applies to some of the things that we're trying to do, right? The creation of Valo, and maybe to talk about it a little bit is, we build rural municipal broadband networks, and we operate them. So we operate them in a carrier-neutral open access method. So the community owns their infrastructure, and then we bring in the service providers who connects the homes individually and provide services. So you have a competitive environment in a small town the same way you would have in an urban center.
Right.
So we bring that competition there. And we utilize existing assets. We're not there to overbuild. So the SuperNet is there, we'll use it. If some other carrier is there, we'll use them, no problem. But we do the connection in the communities. And it's sort of that same thing where you're saying, there's a different way of doing this. Telecom doesn't have to be the way telecom has been for the last 100 years, the way we know it. Now, the Canadian telecom sector is unique in its own way. It has a very different geography, population density. It has challenges that are unique to Canadian telecom, and it has challenges that are similar to any other telecom play. But I think that's what creates the opportunity for us in this market.
Yeah.
We've been trying to figure out the rural broadband for so long that I think we finally have the right level of demand, the right level of interest, and the right model to bring into the rural communities.
Cool. Are there some aspects of the value proposition that Valo is bringing that you can share with the audience that makes it compelling?
Yeah, absolutely. It's to me, one of the things is, when we look at broadband and we look at the need, let's talk. I think you got to talk about the demand as much as you have about the business model and how that fits, right? And the demand is especially amplified by the pandemic. People working from home, people competing for broadband within their home. Right, your kids on Netflix, on Zoom, while you're trying to do a Teams call and all of that. It's just demanding a lot.
Right.
You also have. I was talking to a rural doctor, and they, from their perspective, it's really tough because they can't go to every home and run the risk of getting sick and then just not being available for the entire community.
Yeah.
Because there's only one doctor in that town. And most of the visits that they do are either initial consultations or follow-ups, which could be done through video. But they can't if they don't have that infrastructure, right?
So dial-up's not going to do it.
Dial-up just doesn't do it anymore. And dial-up has its role, it has its place, it had its place. But it just doesn't do it anymore. Same thing with wireless, right? And in fact, same thing with 5G. We hear a lot about 5G, but it all needs that robust, scalable infrastructure. So that's the demand side. And so on our side, one of the challenges that communities had in bringing broadband is really the choices were, let's go to a big telco and tell them, hey, we have 200 people, 400 people in the community. Please, come and deliver services. But economically, now that small community is competing for capital within that big company. And that big company is really going to deploy capital where they get the best return.
Right.
And it's not that community, right? So that's a challenge. That was one option. The other option is they say, well, we could fund it. We can, and there's been lots of programs out there. We'll pay money for a telecom company to come into our community, but then you're stuck with one, right? You don't have much choice. Maybe they just do the low-hanging fruit. And I'm not suggesting that's what they all do, but I know some have in the past. That's been a challenge. So we come in right into the middle where we say, invest your capital, your public money, but keep the asset. The asset is yours. And we'll operate that asset. We'll bring the service providers. So now if we don't perform, we're out. So the community retains control of an asset they own. And we bring in that competitive market. And if we're not successful with the service providers, in other words, delivering a good service, then we're penalized. Right. So it's just this right balance of economics and incentives. And once that infrastructure is in, the cost of delivering services is so much lower that it makes it competitive and sustainable for everyone. So it really is that win-win. Communities get to invest and keep, and we get to operate and make our return.
I have to share, like, there's so many synergies here with what what we're trying to build at Connect First, right? These 4 credit unions coming together, of which 2 of them were very much, and they are across rural Alberta. We're trying to stay relevant in those communities, and it's challenging, right? Like, we can't just because we have a building in a town doesn't mean people want to deal with us. We've got to have competitive offers. We've got to have a great digital experience. All those things, and I hear you're talking about the value proposition you've got there. Very similar for us in many ways.
Imagine a credit union offering internet services in a community.
Yeah, there you go. Well, and why not, right? Like, the world's changed.
So when we say what's the impact of technology, I think right there, that's it. If that's an opportunity for an industry traditionally focused on one thing, we're going to enable through capital. We're going to enable businesses and homes to be bought and stimulate the economy. And then you look at technology, and maybe it is or it isn't, I don't know, but there's an opportunity that technology affords. And I think that's how technology gets applied. And that's what makes it so complicated, because you can't say definitively, what, that's a great idea, we'll do that. There's so much more to it, but it brings at least the opportunity to look at it. And
unlocking entirely new business models and making what previously may not have been possible, which is very, very cool. Now, you're not only involved in leading Valo, you've been involved in the Calgary Chamber for quite a few years. That's how I got to know you a little bit.
We got to work together.
You were also chair of the Calgary Chamber for a long time, actually. Acting CEO, if I recall, for a little while when we went through a CEO transition. Like, you've been very involved with the Chamber for decades, I believe. Tell me.
Joined since 97.
It's awesome. It's awesome. So tell me, and I know you've been very vocal at the Chamber around the need of the Chamber to support technology, innovation in our province, etc. Any thoughts there around, like, what's important to you, things we need to be doing differently in this province?
And it was a pleasure to serve on the board and represent the business community. It was a highlight in my career, and I learned so much. We got to work with great people on the board, right, and go through all the issues that are facing business in general, from taxation to different policies. And one of the things I really take away from that is the importance of a good policy environment. So I think going into it, I wouldn't realize how important that is. And that's what I would say, right? From a decision maker to policy makers within our governments, municipal, provincial, federal, it's what is that environment that's going to stimulate and create the environment for people to come here, invest here, create here, fail here, and just have that machination of innovation that we need for a healthy tech sector, right? So that's what I'm always advocating, and I don't always have the right answer. Like, I can't tell you that I know how the policy should be made, but I know that, for those that need to make those tough decisions, if we can help make them make better decisions, then I think that's really helpful. But that policy environment is really going to be important, because it touches on so much.
Are there any other organizations out there that you're seeing that are doing great things here in Calgary or Alberta right now?
As Platform is one that's building that facility next to the library, and it's mostly going to be parkade, and they're going to have, I think it's 2, maybe 3 of
that's
the
an
floors.
Interesting mix in itself. Actually,
it is an interesting mix,
cool.
and I think it is cool, right? It's looking at it in a very practical way, and not saying like an innovation hub needs to be a certain shape, a certain size. It's actually really about where it is and how people come together. So it's in the right location, and Platform is a really good organization that is advocating and helping and doing programming, and is a place for Calgary Tech to go to and just connect, right? Get that serendipity going. A lot of it is obviously virtually right now, but that's all going to change over time. That's going to be the hub, in my view, of where it is. Then you've got organizations like Intergen, which is connecting the crowd in Calgary and in Alberta that has done it and been there and been successful, maybe in a more traditional industry, but know that the future lies in innovation and technology, and are lending their time and their capital to getting that younger generation the resources they need to be successful, right? And I think that's a really good one as well for stimulating that innovation.
Yeah, right on. And a small plug for the Calgary Chamber. You were a strong advocate in having the Chamber invest in some of those organizations, which they have done as well.
That's right.
So putting their money where their mouth is on that.
Exactly.
So
community.
which is awesome. You're a member of the A100.
Yeah.
So what is it, like a special club where they give you like secret decoder rings and stuff like that?
No, it's no secret decoder ring, no handshakes, no nothing like that. It's a poorly kept secret if it is. The A100 is actually it was a real honor to be asked to join because it's looking for it's really trying to collect the tech community, right? And the people that have experience in the tech sector have done it. And that one's all about giving back. It really is. You're on the website, people can find you, LinkedIn otherwise, and then connect. And it's been really cool for me personally. I found it really rewarding to be able to talk to small startups, to medium-sized company, to growth companies, and just have them pick your brain and be able to talk and learn from them. Like, it's just amazing. You've done things, but you talk to people that are doing it now versus 5 years ago. And it's just amazing what they're doing and how they're approaching things,
which is very cool.
Yeah, which is really cool. So, been part of that organization now for about a year, and I know there's a lot of very talented people in that organization that represent all sectors of technology in Alberta. It's quite a good one.
So, when you look ahead at the next decade, Phil, are you optimistic about the future of the province as it relates to technology?
I am.
Yeah.
And I, cautiously, because it's really tough out there for so many people. And I wouldn't want any optimism from me to be interpreted by anyone to think that those issues aren't real. I think they are, and they need a lot of attention. But we're going through a big transition in this province, right? And I don't mean the energy trend. Like I'm talking about just as a province itself. The mix of people that we have, we've always had, I think, more of the population that wasn't from Alberta that lives in Alberta. But now we've had this base of Albertans born and bred here. My kids have been born and bred here. One of them is a software engineer. Like he's growing up in the tech sector from Alberta, which, 15 years ago, technology were from somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
So we're starting to see homegrown talent. We're seeing the universities that are starting to develop those programs. And I firmly believe, and that's why we're here with Valo, and that's why certain number of my companies we've built them here. I think there is opportunity in Alberta, and there is a bright future in Alberta, but I don't think that road's going to be easy. I think we're going to have to go through quite a few things to get there. But that's okay, because that's what you need, right? If you equate it to a startup or to a scale up company, you go through a hell of a lot of turbulence and a lot of pivoting and a lot of disagreements and a lot of compromising. But when you get there, you go, that was worth it.
Yeah.
And I think we're in that kind of position in Alberta. It's going to be worth it. We just got to go through it.
Yeah. That's very cool. And when you're in the middle of it, you don't even recognize sometimes if you're actually making progress or not, right? Like we've been talking about this transition for a long time, and we're doing it.
Yeah.
It won't be until we've actually done it that we go, oh, yeah, we were actually making progress.
We did it. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It doesn't feel like progress until you're done.
Exactly.
That's why that expression, slow at first, then really fast, because it doesn't feel like it. But that's a good thing to remind ourselves of, right? That this is what progress feels like, this uncomfortable, situations that you're in, and not really having a clear vision of what the future is or a clear view of what the future is. That's what progress feels like, right?
Yeah.
And it's very daunting, but
so if I
we can get there.
I know I totally agree we can. But let's say I'm starting a new business, or I'm planning to lean in and take a big chance on myself, start a new technology company. I've got some great ideas, and I call you. You're an A100 member. You've been around the block a couple times building these businesses. Could you give me the top 2 or 3 pieces of advice that you would share as a new entrepreneur taking this on?
Yeah, well, one of them is like I said before, right? Like welcome the opportunities as the opportunities come. I would say, even within a business, a lot of the small startups that I've spoken with and I've seen sometimes get fixated on an idea and on a passion, and it becomes the sacred cow, right? It's like we can't change from this idea, when in fact that's the basis for a better idea, or maybe something that's more in demand at the time. So to never turn that away, right? I'll always welcome that feedback. I can't stress perseverance enough. It's exactly what we were talking about now. It's not going to feel very comfortable. at first. There's going to be a lot of what the hell am I doing at 3 o'clock in the morning? And is this really the right thing for me to take my family through? And doubt, but that perseverance and betting on yourself. If you're going to bet on yourself, go for it, double down. And then the third I would say is really, you're not alone, and it feels like you're alone, but you're not. There's a lot of organizations, and whichever one it is, whether it be a chamber, and that's what it was for me in the early 2000s. Whether it's a chamber, it's a platform, it's some of the programs that you see at CED, it's what Intergen is doing, it's what the university is doing, it's what all sorts of organizations. Don't do this by yourself. Surround yourselves with peers, surround yourself with good people, get that advisory board. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because a lot of people will give you that help.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
If there's anything that you would want to share about Valo, and anybody listening, if they want to find out more, what would you want them to know?
Yeah, valonetworks.com. That's probably the best place to go. We're on LinkedIn. We're ramping up a little bit more of our communication as well to what we do. For communities that are out there, and we're looking for service providers to be on the network and deliver services to the end customers. That's the way our model works. We want that competition. We're looking at, and I've been saying this to the policymakers every chance they give me. We're a friendly voice to rural broadband. We're a big advocate of it. We're not here to bash the telcos. We think they're a very important piece. They invest a lot of money in the province. They're a big piece of the puzzle. But their puzzle pieces only go so far, and only focus on certain areas. And I think there's a lot of room elsewhere. And we've got a very strong vision. We've got some very good backers, and we're very committed to this. We've been investing heavily to grow. So
awesome.
We're getting ready.
Awesome. And from our perspective, speaking for all the communities that we're in supporting, we know that broadband is the great equalizer, that we need to get more and more of our members, small businesses, the farmers, ranchers, make sure that they have accessibility to that
it's that
technology.
basic infrastructure. We're looking at it from. I think we're looking at it correctly, generally from a Canadian perspective. You'd be very hard pressed to find someone that says, no, we don't need more broadband in rural areas, right? How we do that is going to be the challenge, because we have such a vast country that's regulated nationally from a central location in central Canada. It's very hard to put policies that apply to each of the jurisdictions. So there's going to be a lot of collaboration that's going to be needed. I think we're up for the challenge. We've figured this out as a nation before. We'll figure this one out. But it's that basic infrastructure for innovation. We look in Alberta, and our economy is where people aren't, right?
Yeah.
And we need to find a way of connecting into that GDP. Like, we want to be the most connected GDP area in the world. We want to have the most connected ag sector in the world. We want to have the most connected energy sector in the world. And if we do, that's a competitive advantage. When you have a company like Shell, who says, or anyone globally who says, we need to test our new technology of remote sensors or driverless cars or trucks. Where are they going to do that? They're going to do that where the infrastructure exists. In agriculture, where are they going to invest? They're going to invest where they're able to deploy the technology that they're investing in.
Right.
And we want to be that place, right? So we're certainly not the end all and be all. Valo plays in a very specific space, and we're proud to be in that space. But I think we fit that critical infrastructure quite nicely.
And I think you're finding innovative ways to solve problems that the system on its own doesn't solve on its own.
No.
Right.
No,
so would you have advice for us? Connect First, we're trying to reimagine what a credit union looks like for the 2020s. And as a growing business here in the province, any advice to Connect First?
Oh man, I'll be the last to tell you how to run your business, but since you asked, the mobility piece, right? And this goes nothing but to reinforce what I know you already know. We've talked about this before, but the mobility of people and the mobility of talent, and to be able to do your banking on the fly and be able to access those resources. I think credit unions, especially in outside the major centers, play such a critical community role. To be a part of that community is wonderful, and I would encourage continued support of those communities. They need capital, they need talent, they need training. People are looking for ways to innovate. And the next great invention, I'm convinced, will come from rural areas. So you guys are right there.
There's so many aligning stories that you shared with our story here too. Like I think about, you're providing innovative ways to solve problems when sometimes the big telcos, which are so important, can't solve. We're looking at ways to solve challenges in our communities, in our province, when sometimes those big banks aren't going to be the ones to solve them.
It's the same thing, right? And it's not like it's not that they're malicious about it. Yeah. They're just, the economic model doesn't work. They have a million customers in Calgary they have to service. 200 over here is it's really hard, right, to do it to the same level. And I get that. And there was a part of my career where I would be frustrated with that, and it was more combative. But, where my thinking's evolved now is no, that's actually good. It opens up the market for me. And it's the same thing in your case. Yeah. And B, I think, realistically, I could not service with Valo 30,000 customers in downtown Calgary effectively. But I can do the communities, I could do the regional networks, I could do that because we're built that way, right?
That's awesome.
So I think there's room for all.
I really have to say this has been a lot of fun for me. I've known you a long time. It's funny, you get to know someone and we talk sometimes, the quick 30-second conversation over the water cooler about business, and then we get into the meetings that we're in together, rarely talking about each other's business. So this was really fascinating for me, and I learned a lot. I know our audience will very much appreciate that. But I have one last question for you. If you were to make a prediction on the future of our province 10 years from now, will we be saying technology has emerged to become a major sector of economic growth?
Absolutely.
For us?
We have no choice. Absolutely.
Okay. I agree. I agree with that. So I predict the same. So to our audience, we got two people here predicting a very exciting and prosperous future in the long run, but it's going to be a challenge getting from
It will
here
be.
to
It'll
there.
be a road to get there. It's not going to be easy, but we're up for the challenge. This is Alberta. We can do it. Absolutely.
So it is right on. So this is the end of this is our first official podcast. The first one was an introduction. This is our first great conversation. Thank you so much, Phil,
thanks
for
having me. It's a great pleasure.
Next steps. It takes passionate people to change the world. And that was a great conversation with Phil, a truly passionate Albertan, a passionate leader who's driving change in our province and leading by example by building a great business right here, right now. And he shared some real world experience, and stories around tenacity, resilience, and courage. The qualities that we're all going to have if we're going to face up to the challenges we have as a province together, and to take on those challenges and win. Our province was built on those skills. Things like courage are, they're the middle name of so many Albertans. I know that that we all know. We can do this. At Connect First, we are working to do what others say can't be done too. We've realized that if we're going to be successful, we have to become a technology company. And we are on that journey as we reinvent a credit union designed for the 2020s. But here's a prediction I'm going to make right now. If I could look at the future 10 years from now, we're going to be surprised to see that companies like Valo, like Connect First Credit Union are going to be leaders in technology. They're going to be household names across our province. And we're going to be building a stronger Alberta together. We're going to continue the conversation, and next time, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk local. So, if you liked what you heard today, share it. Let us know what you think. Follow us, or follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter @real_Wellington. See you next time on What's Next Alberta.